Hi, a few people have asked me what my video editing workflow is for correcting the fisheye effect that you get from the Y4K cameras. There are many different ways that you can do this, but the one that I use and I'm happy with is by using Photoshop. Um, Not a lot of people will use Photoshop for video editing. Um, Not a lot of people know that you can actually use it for video editing, but for me, I think it's an excellent tool if it's something you've already got, and you can get really good results from it. So, um, first things first, then is that we identify which um, video clip we want to edit and remove the fisheye. So I've got one down here. Which is not overly distorted, I don't think, but I just want to show you the process I go through and how it looks after. So if I put that video on now, so this shot on in 4K 30 frames per second, and like I say, it doesn't look too bad on the fisheye, but it is. There's no lens rectification in camera on, so the fisheye effect is there. Um, so we're going to just edit that clip and get rid of it. So the way I do it is right click the video clip and do open with and then go to Photoshop. Um, the only criticism I've got of using Photoshop is that obviously it's geared to editing photos. Uh, So it's not the fastest piece of software when editing video files. So in effect, what it does is it breaks every single frame down into an individual photo, and then it automatically edits each of those photos and then exports it back out to a video file. So it's now loaded the file up and it's put it in, as we can see, a video group down at the bottom. And very much like any other editing software, you've got your timeline at the bottom. You've got the beginning, so 0, 0, 0, which is the beginning of it, and on the right hand side is towards the end. So if I click anywhere um, on this timeline, it'll then change and it'll give me the frame from that. Now by default, this layer that it creates is put into blue. Now blue indicates that each one, any changes that you make will be made to that particular photo that you're on. So um, if you've got um, if you've got 60 seconds worth of footage, for every second of that 60 seconds, you're going to, if you've shot in 30 frames a second, you're going to have 30 photos for every second up to the very end of it. So that's a lot to go editing. You can't edit each frame, frame by frame. It would take an absolute lifetime. So what you want to do is you want to edit a single frame, and you want to tell Photoshop that whatever you edit to that single frame is applied to all frames. Um, so it's very important you do this, because if you don't, what will happen is when you save the video file, it'll just edit the one frame that you've currently selected, and then everything else will be back as it normally was. So to do this, it's very easy. You just right click in the right hand side where it says layer 1, and there's an option that comes up on the pop-up menu called Convert to Smart Object. So once you select that, you'll see that the blue has now turned purple. So if you see that that timeline is purple, that means that no matter where you are on that timeline, um, any editing that you make will be applied to all of the frames. Okay, so normally what you would do is find somewhere that you you want to be viewing whilst you edit. So say for example, for this, if you've got some vertical pillars or a doorway or something like that that you want the distortion to be taken out of, because it'll be either curved or misshaped, then you find it on the timeline. So that allows you to visually see the difference that you're making to each frame. Um, in this instance, it's very difficult to see where the distortion is, but let's say I want to pick that point there. Okay, so there's two ways that you can do distortion correction within Photoshop. But generally speaking, when you do distortion correction, um, a lot of software out there will keep the frame that sizing that you've got. So generally speaking, if you shot it in 16:9, it will keep that ratio and um, it will adjust the correction, but it will still try to maintain that crop ratio. Now what this means is that when you adjust it, the center of the picture gets corrected, but the very outer corners get stretched, and you end up with a really weird looking um, uh, correction, in my opinion, and that's why I like to use Photoshop. Give give you a good example now. This is not how I would normally do it, but just to show you. So if you go under filter, and then there's a lens correction part. Now this is not how I normally do the lens correction, because I don't like the way that it does the lens correction. So if we go into lens correction, we can see it shows you the picture, and there's some auto correction, so you can choose certain ones, or you can go to custom. Um, and then in the custom part, you've got a remove distortion slider, and if you move it to the left, you'll see it zooms in, and so the center of it is it's pushing out the fisheye distortion towards you, and you can see the outer parts get squashed. If I go the other way to correct, to remove it, you can see that if we look at the bottom left hand corner where the stones are, if we move it fully to the right, you can see it's zoomed in, but it's also squashed, or sorry, stretched some of them. You can see that movement there is just stretching out the corner bits, which I don't like. I think it can look really bad. It's not so bad on photos, but on when you want to do video, if you're panning or moving through on that, the corners will look really bad. So we're not going to use that. And incidentally, there is um, a, um, a lens correction profile that I created in the Facebook page for Yi Technology, which is um, one of these. So again, that works on the same principle, and you can see here in the corners, it has kind of stretched out what was in those corners, which I don't like that effect. So I generally don't use that. So cancelled out that, and I've gone back to where we were. So that was just for information. Normally I wouldn't go in there. The way that I would edit this is, and to be perfectly honest with you, all the editing that I would do to a video file in Photoshop would be done under the camera raw filter. So you would do filter, camera raw filter. Okay, so if we select that, it'll then take us into another screen. Now, personally, I prefer to do color correction, lens distortion correction, rotation, white balance, all of it in this area because it's so simple to do, um, and you can the tools are all there, and you're not having to um, you're not having to go to different places to do different things. So, like for example, white balance, you can just click this pipette bar up here, and we can pick something that's grey or white. So if we say take that, click on it, and it'll adjust the temperature and the tint based upon the selector bar. And if you're not happy with that, you can click somewhere else and it'll change. And just generally keep changing the white balance to get it to how you want, and then you can change the exposure and your highlights and so on and so forth. It's really good area. So I'm just going to cancel out that so I don't pick that and go back in. So, but I think what I will do is I'll do a separate video on how to use these areas to do color correction and white balance and so on. But for this one, this is lens correction. So the lens correction is really easy to do. You've got a little at the top of the bottom, a little picture of a lens, which is there, which says lens correction. You click on it, and it goes into this selection bar. Now, there's no major amount of settings. It's just one slider bar like we had previously, but this time, um, if I go to the left, it zooms in. But if I go to the right, you can now see that it doesn't keep the um, it doesn't keep the 16:9, so it doesn't push these edges out. It pin cushions it, which for me is the better way of doing it, because although these very corners are stretched, if you imagine that if I took it to be 100 at that point, all of these grey and white areas are areas that don't have any data, so they're no good to us. So we're going to have to crop this picture. So your crop line is going to be right up to this left-hand side, and right up to this right-hand side, and right up to the top, and right up to the bottom. So that's then going to dictate. So if you drew a line, it would bring it to about where that is. So so on here, for example, it would bring it down to about there, and you can see that the bits that have got stretched are not in the crop area, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But generally speaking, on the distortion, you can go up to 100, and normally I go usually between 60 and 70, depending on what I'm videoing. If there's a lot of vertical lines in terms of size of buildings or doorways or pillars or something like that, then sometimes I will push it and I will go right up to 100, because that's maybe what you need. But you need to bear in mind, the more you push it to 100, the more you lose off the sides, and the more that the the picture the picture will be cropped and hence be further away from being 4K. So for this purposes, I'm going to put it to 70, which is there. Okay, so all that's done is it's pinched in the sides and the top and the bottom. Excuse me, and it's now given us it's corrected some of the distortion that's in there, and it's now going to allow us to to save that, and I'll show you what I do after that. So if I click OK on that, it's then gonna do the correction within Photoshop. I then normally would go to the crop, which is over here on the left hand side. Now when you select crop, you can draw what you want, or you can go up to, if you look, there's a red line all the way around, which is the current crop area. And all I normally do is I reduce the top one down halfway towards uh, the top line there, and then I go to the bottom, and then I move that one down halfway towards the bottom point, and I just keep doing that until I get this. I'll just show you. So these right hand sides, although I'm not adjusting them, they are adjusting themselves because the ratio is still on. So if I adjust to so that they're just within the edges, and then I can click OK. Now that's now zoomed in onto that particular part, but we've still got these cutouts at the top. And you can't do anything about that, because if you did, then your whole picture's going to be distorted. So that's why on a lot of videos that I do, if I have done lens correction, I'll apply black bars at the top to give it a 2.35 to 1 ratio, like cinematograph look to it. So once you've got that, it's very simple. You just go down to the bottom to this little arrow that's in the bottom left hand corner, and you click on that one. Comes up. You can then select where you want to put it, the name of it, and the size. So the file, even though we've cropped it, it's still going to save it as a 3840 by 2160, which is 4K. So that means that it's going to do some upscaling, and it does a pretty good job of it as well. So you still end up with a 4K video, and once I've got that 4K video, I'll then apply, like I said, in another software, I'll then apply those bars to it. I said at the beginning, the only criticism is how slow it is. So, you know, when I click render, it will take quite a while to do. So if I click render, you'll see a pop-up box giving you progress saying exporting video, and that will take pretty much a clip that size on my computer will probably take me probably about 45 minutes to an hour. So so it is pretty slow, and it does need a fairly hefty computer, but I do think it corrects it a lot better than other software out there. Okay, so I think that's it. That's in general how I do my lens correction. I hope it is of use to someone. Thank you. Bye.